good afternoon. The Secretary General and the Prime Minister will make introductory remarks, and then we'll take a few questions remotely. Secretary General.
Prime Minister Šimonytė, dear Ingrida, welcome to NATO. I know this is your first visit as Prime Minister to the NATO headquarters, so I would like to start by wishing you all the best in your new position. Lithuania is a strong and highly valued NATO ally. You host a German-led battle group in Rukla, deterring any possible aggression. And your troops help to build security in Afghanistan in many years. And you lead by example on defense spending more than 2% of GDP on defense. Lithuania also shares expertise on energy security through the NATO Center of Excellence in Vilnius. Today, we discussed preparations for the NATO summit, which is now less than 2 weeks away. We are well prepared to take ambitious decisions, modernizing our alliance under the NATO 2030 initiative. We will reinforce our unity, including with a strengthened commitment to collective defense. This means continued improvements to our readiness and our capabilities. And Lithuania has been a strong voice supporting this continued adaptation of our alliance. Today, we also discussed the situation in Belarus. The state hijacking of a passenger plane last month was dangerous and unacceptable. All allies strongly condemn the arrest of journalist Roman Protasevich and his companion Sofia Sapega. We call for their immediate release. And we support the sanctions introduced by the United States and other NATO allies, as well as the European Union. I am sure that at our summit, leaders will discuss Belarus's outrageous actions, as well as Russia's continued pattern of reckless behavior. This includes its continued significant military presence in and around Ukraine. The level of Russian troops and weapons in the region remain high, so NATO continues to monitor the situation very closely. We stand in full support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and we will continue to support Ukraine to help the country advance its Euro-Atlantic integration. So, Prime Minister, thank you once again for Lithuania's many contributions to our shared security. I look forward to working with you in the months ahead as we continue to strengthen and adapt our alliance. So, welcome.
So, thank you very much, dear Secretary General, and it was my great pleasure to be able to meet you in person. We had the chance to exchange our views on the phone during the most severe COVID situation, but now we can be a little bit more back on track with our usual meetings and visits. So it was a very good opportunity to discuss the most pressing security issues just a little bit more than a week ahead of NATO summit. And of course, one thing that needs no additional proof is that NATO is a crucial organization for our country's security and also for our common security. And therefore, we very much welcome what has been done so far and what will be done in future by the mutual efforts to strengthen not only our situation, not only our security, because our security is also security of the whole bloc. We welcome very much the progress on NATO 2030 and the debate that will happen soon, and also the ambitious proposals by Secretary General. But with the fact that there are new challenges and new issues arising, like hybrid attacks, cybersecurity, and others, still we think that the primary role of deterrence and defense by NATO should be further strengthened and emphasized, given that we see a situation as a little bit of a paradox. On one hand, Lithuania has never been safer than it is now, being member of so many strong international organization, NATO, European Union, Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. But on the other hand, situation around us in the region is not only not stable, but it's deteriorating, and definitely we need to strengthen our emphasis on deterrence and defense as much as possible. Of course, Lithuania is not only having wishes for the bloc to participate in our defense, but we are also doing our part. We've increased the share of spending, and we are meeting the 2% criteria, but I would say that this is not the end of story, because the government has even more ambitious plan for the next 10 years period. But we understand that our security is also first and foremost our own responsibility. So we need to do as much as we can ourselves, and then do even more together with our partners. Of course, we also contribute to NATO's missions and operations that are ongoing globally, and we will continue to do so and use our expertise and our people who are well prepared, well respected in those international endeavors to participate further on. And of course, we will continue to invest into host country support for allied troops that are present in our country, and necessary military infrastructure. We were briefly discussing, and Secretary General mentioned the situation with Belarus. And we must all keep in mind that what happened a little bit less than 2 weeks ago was an unprecedented attack on civil aviation, citizens of European Union, people traveling from one EU country to another EU country, from one NATO capital to another NATO capital. And of course, we need to be mindful of what is happening, because it's happening just close to, behind NATO's borders, as our border is also the eastern border of European Union and NATO alliance. So we very much need to act together, and there the statement that was issued by NATO was very strong and on time. I guess most of international community reacted promptly and strongly, but this is not the end of story, and I think we should also maintain our pressure on Lukashenko regime, also on Kremlin, to first and foremost release all the political prisoners, definitely, and then give the people the right to choose their fate. So thank you very much once again, and looking for further cooperation.
We'll take a few questions. We'll start with Lithuanian National Radio and Television, Mindaugas Laukagalis.
Yes, hello. I would like to ask about the unity of NATO position on Belarus, because the media report showed that there are some disagreements between some EU countries, for example, Turkey. So is the alliance really united? And having that in mind, what concrete decisions could be reached or are being proposed for the next NATO summit, which is like in a few weeks? Thank you.
So NATO is united, and NATO allies, all 30 NATO allies, agreed a very strong statement last week, where we strongly condemned the forced landing of a civilian aircraft on its way from one NATO capital, Athens, to another NATO capital, Vilnius. And this was a very clear and strong political message. We also, in that statement, called for an impartial international investigation into what happened, and we also, of course, condemned the fact that a journalist, Roman Protasevich, and his companion they were arrested. And we called for the immediate release of both of them. And I have also, again and again, on behalf of NATO, called for the immediate release of all political prisoners in Belarus. I also welcome the fact that NATO allies, the United States, the United Kingdom, and also, of course, the European Union are imposing sanctions as a direct consequence of the forced landing of the plane. Let me add that these sanctions are important because we have to demonstrate that there are consequences when basic international norms and rules are violated in the way we saw also when the plane from Athens to Vilnius was forced to land.
The next question goes to Rustavi 2, Tamara Nutsubidze.
Thank you for this opportunity. Lithuania is a big supporter of Ukraine's and Georgia's Euro-Atlantic integration. So what do you think? Can Georgia and Ukraine expect some concrete positive signals from the upcoming NATO summit? And should or will NATO members discuss these issues on the meeting in Brussels? Thank you very much. And the same question to Sakjen. Thank you.
Then I start, and then the Secretary General will definitely put more light to it. I just can assure once more that we think it was a very big achievement for a country like Lithuania, Baltic states, to be able to join the strongest alliances that are there around the globe. And this adds up to not only our security and safety, but also to security and safety in the region. So therefore, no surprise that Lithuania is, and will be an advocate of open door policy. We see a need of developing closer cooperation and partnership with countries that do think like we do think in the bloc, and therefore no surprise that most probably on all the fora where there will be this debate, we will be strongly supporting Ukraine and Georgia in this respect.
I expect that when the NATO leaders, NATO heads of state and government meet on the 14th of June here in Brussels, that they will reiterate their strong commitment to support the sovereignty and territorial integrity of both Georgia and Ukraine, two very close and highly valued partners of NATO. I also expect that they will state very clearly that we will provide political support, but also practical support. It's extremely important that we continue to work together with these two important partners, partly because that's good for all of us, for NATO, but also it is a way for NATO to demonstrate that when Russia tries to violate their territorial integrity, try to intimidate them, then NATO allies are partners of these two countries, and we are ready to provide strong support to both of them. I welcome the fact that over years we have been able to step by step up and strengthen our partnership with Georgia and Ukraine, and I'm absolutely confident that that will also be the clear message from the summit in 2 weeks' time.
Next question goes to UAB All Media Lithuania, Augustina Sulia.
Thank you. I would have a question for Secretary General about the recent statement by Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and about him claiming that Russia will deploy around 20 new military formations and units near its western borders. How NATO is assessing this? Can it be seen as a threat and response to Western action on Belarus and Russia? Thank you.
NATO is a defensive alliance, and what we do is in no way a threat to Russia. What we have seen is a significant military build-up by Russia over many years. They have modernized their military capabilities, both their conventional capabilities and the nuclear capabilities. They have deployed new missiles, including missiles violating the INF Treaty that led to the demise of the treaty. And more importantly, Russia has been willing to use military force against neighbors, as we have seen in Georgia, as we have seen in Ukraine, illegally annexing Crimea and continue to destabilize eastern Ukraine. So, of course, NATO has to make sure that we send a very clear and strong message of credible deterrence and defense. That's the reason why we have increased our readiness, why we have deployed for the first time in our history battle groups, combat-ready battle groups to the eastern part of the alliance. And we will continue to make sure that there is no room for miscalculation, misunderstandings about NATO's readiness, NATO's capability, and NATO's resolve to protect and defend all allies. Just what we have seen over the last weeks in and around Ukraine, with a significant Russian military buildup, just highlights what kind of behavior we have seen from Russia over the last years, and also highlights the importance of NATO remaining vigilant, that we closely monitor the situation, and that we send a very clear message of unity and resolve. And again, I'm absolutely confident that that will be the message from the leaders when they meet at the NATO summit on the 14th of June.
And for the last question, we'll go to TV Median Ketevan Kardava.
Good evening. I have a question regarding the strategy 2030 NATO. In 11 days, you will discuss with your colleagues this strategy. Madam Prime Minister, from the point of view of Lithuania, what is urgently needed to ensure that the alliance can defend its norms, strengthen its instruments, and be not only attractive for aspirant countries as Georgia and Ukraine, but ready to make decisions, to invite them? And Mr. Secretary General, after a NATO summit, US President will meet with his Russian colleague. Your expectations? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for your question. I think that this is an insight on how NATO, the 2030 strategy is an insight how we should adapt our way of action, taking into account the new challenges that are popping up from all sorts of new activities, new infrastructure, new technologies, and new processes that we can see globally. And this is extremely important. But as Secretary General has already mentioned, and which is very important, this is an alliance that was set for defense. So we think that this role will remain crucial. The deterrence and defense and the decision-making and the processes that are aligned to this primary need as much as possible. But of course, we need to develop our capabilities to react to cyber attacks or hybrid attacks or whatever new threats that are upcoming, unfortunately, due also to actions of the countries that were also mentioned during this press conference before. So.
I'm looking forward to welcoming President Biden to Brussels in a couple of weeks' time. I'm absolutely confident that when we meet, we will discuss a wide range of issues, including NATO's relationship with Russia. And again, the NATO 2030 agenda is about how NATO should respond, adapt to a more assertive Russia, a Russia responsible for aggressive actions against its neighbors. So I think we'll have a good discussion on those issues when we meet with President Biden or when all NATO leaders meet here in Brussels. Then I welcome that Biden, after his meeting with NATO leaders, will travel on and meet with the President Putin. And the meeting between President Biden and President Putin, that is in line with NATO's dual-track approach to Russia. We need deterrence, defense, but also dialogue when it comes to Russia. Because we need to have a firm and predictable message to Russia, especially when you see the reckless behavior of Russia. At the same time, we need to have dialogue because we need to strive for a better relationship with Russia. Russia is our neighbor, and we need to strive for reducing tensions and improving the relationship. But even if we don't believe in a better relationship in the foreseeable future, we need to talk to Russia because we need to manage a difficult relationship, and we need to address issues like transparency, risk reduction, with more military presence, with more exercises, with higher tensions along our borders. Actually, we see now that the NATO-Russia relationship is at the lowest point since the end of the Cold War. We need to prevent incidents and accidents, miscalculations, misunderstandings, and therefore military lines of communications, transparency, predictability is important, especially when the relationship is difficult as it is now. And of course, the Biden meeting, the President Biden's meeting with President Putin is part of this dialogue with Russia. Another area where it is important to talk, and that is arms control. And I welcome that President Biden and President Putin, the United States and Russia, that they have agreed to extend the New START agreement, which is the only major arms control agreement that still exists. It is an important agreement because it limits the number of long-range nuclear weapons to 1,550 on each side. But we need to go further to include more weapon systems into arms control. I'm confident that the two presidents will also discuss and address arms control when they meet. So all in all, I welcome the fact that NATO allies will sit together and then that the President of the United States will meet President Putin, and I'm absolutely certain that the issues, for instance, arms control, will be addressed by NATO leaders before President Biden meets President Putin.
Thank you very much. This concludes this press point. Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.